Hello. As a friend of mine, Kenny Rogers, used to say, you got to know when to hold 'em, and you got to know when to fold 'em. So today we're going to be looking at folding cameras, and we're doing this through Larry's lens. Okay, today on our series here, we're doing folding cameras, and I'll start with, everybody realizes that the bellows and the big folding cameras that we used to have, some of the companies, like, this is a Victo, this is one of the first folding cameras, and it would take either film pack or this huge spool size, which was a 1/18 film. And it was 3.5 by 5.5. Made a beautiful postcard. But, as you can see, it was also very large. And this was during the late 1890s, early 1900s that this was developed. So people said, gee, we'd like to have something smaller. So about 1906, Eastman Kodak Company came out with a little film pack camera, and it was very unusual because it was very compact, and you would take and pull it out and lock it in there. This was the only camera that was made that didn't have the lens board on some kind of an extension or self-extending. This had a film pack. You load the film pack in the back, and you would have a piece of paper. You'd pull out the paper to expose the film, take the picture, and so forth. And when you got finished, you'd pull the last one out, take the whole film pack in to your local photography store, or send it back to Eastman Kodak Company, and they would process it. Now, it's really funny because one of the problems that they wanted to eliminate over the box camera. The box camera was fixed focus, and it didn't have a way that you could get closer or farther away, and it had no adjustments, basically. This camera, the box camera, was made basically for people that just wanted to go out in the sunlight, take their family pictures, and so forth. But they wanted to do something more. They wanted to attract the audience that would have the larger cameras, yet didn't want to pack around this huge array of equipment. So they came up with the folding camera. Now, the next folding camera we have here, this was early 1900s. The first one of these cameras didn't have a lens protectorate. And so they had to come back and redesign this. But what it would do is fold out like this. And this was called a self-extracting camera. And it got out here in the front. You could then focus it, and it had a small enough physical size. It used 6/16 film and 1/16 film. So that was one of the first folding cameras, and it folded up to be quite convenient. After that, things got really small. This was about, I'd say this was about dates around the early 1900s also, but it was just before the First World War. And this was the invention of the 127 film by Eastman Kodak Company. They naturally, when you make the film for it, you can make the camera any way you want it. So they made this is one of the first autographic cameras. And it has the little stylus here that you pull out, open the door, and you can write on the film and it was for dates and so forth, so that you'd know when you did it. Or you could write, I guess, whatever you wanted to. This was really popular, but it was very difficult to load. This is one of the spools in here. And the spool on 127 is quite different than any other film because it has a little thing here that you wind with. The 127 was invented in 1912, as I said, and it was done basically to have something in between the 35 millimeter size that was bigger than that and not quite as big as the 120 size. So that was what they did. Now, along with the war, and just before the war, they came out with the 116 size. Now, this particular camera is I'm especially partial to. This is a 1A Kodak Junior. And this particular camera went to Europe during World War I by my father-in-law, who is long gone now, but this is what he took, all the pictures of Paris and in Germany and several other places. This is also an unusual camera because it's the only one I've seen that had this particular kind of clip on here. And here's the stylus, and you can open up the back and sign it right there. That's the autographic part. And now this camera happens to have the stylus. And it's because when you have to put the stylus in before you can close the little latch there. So that's probably why it never got lost. Most of the other ones, this camera also has a stylus, but many of the other autographic cameras, the stylus has been long gone. Along with that, about that time, other camera companies other than Eastman Kodak Company, like Ansco. Ansco was a big competitor. And they came out with cameras that were sort of small, and folding cameras also. This particular camera had a 1/16 size and also had a film pack you could put on the back. You could change the backs and that. Ansco had a particularly hard time with this camera because in order to get the back off, you had to do a real, then you could get to the back. Most people had a hard time if they couldn't remember where to open the camera. They couldn't, and it was particularly hard to close, as you can see. Anyway, we'll leave it like that. The 1/16 size negative is particularly interesting, and I will show you a negative. This is a 1/16 size. This is of a baby that was probably taken in the 20s. This is the size negative this was, and it would take 8 exposures per roll, and also it was a very nice size. So some of the pictures that were taken with that were, it was a very popular size. And I'll show you some of the pictures. Here's an album from the early 20s. People would take pictures of their families, their farms. This is a picture of Grandma Dubert and Louise, relatives of mine, or my wife's, I should say. Here's some pictures of some horses. So photography was becoming very popular, and as it went, the photographs that they would take, they'd be able to send to people, and the smaller size they were able to put in their wallets. The postcard size you couldn't take and put it in your pocket very easily without bending and folding. So anyway, Ansco came out with several other cameras, and this is one of their other ones, but they still had the same problem with trying to get it opened. It was really a problem. But as you can see, many of the cameras still had, the folding cameras still had really nice woodwork, and they were very popular. One of the things about the folding camera is that they had a little scale along this size, and you pull it out. For instance, this is you set it on infinity, or it's in both feet and meters. And so you estimate the distance, and you set that accordingly. So it goes either out in front for close-up shots or back. However, it's really difficult to tell because the only thing you had was a viewfinder. One of the things that Ansco did have was a ground glass, so that you could actually focus on that ground glass. So there were several other features on the folding camera. One was, we talked about the ball bearing shutter, but they also had shutter release cables like this, so you could actually set it on something. One of the things that people don't realize, these little clips here are little feet so that you can set it on something solid and photograph it this way. They also had one that Kodak had, the kind of the only one on this, is they had this little clip here that would come out so that if you wanted to take a horizontal picture, you could lay that flat and take a picture. Also, the viewfinder would turn sideways. This is for verticals. That's for horizontals. So they had a lot of features built into this. A lot of people don't realize that were really kind of neat. Also, they had this is one of the first cameras, the folding cameras that started to have a tripod mount, so that you could mount it on a tripod. And it was fastened directly to the bed. Other features were the carrying strap, which is made out of genuine leather, and oftentimes you'll find the handles that are missing. Like I have several here that are missing the handles because the leather has gone by the wayside in the last 100 years. Wow, 100 years. That's amazing.
Women, we've all been there, every month. However, have you ever stopped to think what it might be like for a woman living on the street? A woman without enough money for those monthly essentials? Well, this will make you see red. In the city of Tempe alone, there are over 600 homeless. Over 30% are women. Every month, these women need basic feminine hygiene products, which average about $20 a month. Yet most public facilities do not provide these basic needs without a charge. So how can you help? Visit our website at womenforwomentempe.org, where you can donate money through PayPal, volunteer to help assemble bags at one of our packing parties, or purchase items from our Amazon wish list. You can also like us on Facebook and spread the word to your friends.
I wish more people supported this program because it does a lot of help.
Thank you so much for the feminine hygiene products. Out here on the streets, it's hard to come up with the funds for from $5 to $8 for a box, and the hand wipes that we get, it definitely makes it easier to be a woman out here and homeless. Thank you so much, Women for Women.
With knowledge comes responsibility. Now that you know, how will you respond? Women for Women. Dignity, health, period.
Okay, and back in the 20s, about in the 20s, a lot of German cameras started being made. Photography in Germany and France and all of Europe was very popular, and especially the French, because they had been involved with it, as you know, from day one. So one of the cameras is this is a Viola 295. This was one of these people made a lot of view cameras and made this size, and they had some very nice features to them. They had easy focusing on the side. You had a big part here that you could see. You could easily see. They were pretty easy to use. The Germans had a pretty good function. And later on, a company by the name of Zeiss Icon made cameras like this that were extremely popular because they both satisfied the need for the professional and for the amateur. They had the focusing scale on the side. They had an easier thing here that you could focus, and it was click stopped. Also, it had a swings and tilts. You could raise the front and you could do the back. And equipped with that was also a ground glass on here so that you could view through the lens just like a regular view camera, yet it was a small camera. This camera happens to have, it has part of the viewfinder. The viewfinder was like this, and there was a wire frame that went around here. This camera's lost its wire frame, but it would flip up this way and you could use it as a sports camera for photographing sports, football, basketball, or other kinds of things. Or maybe even soccer in Germany. Anyway, that was one of the very first cameras that Zeiss started making. Zeiss is really known for making very fine hardware. They're very almost over-engineered and designed. They're very solid cameras, and they can both take most of the stuff that they did up until about the 1940s would take either film pack, large film pack, or they would take roll film. They had roll film backs. So they were a pretty nice little thing there. This is a Thoth Derby, and this was made in Europe. It was a very popular camera. It used the 127 film that was designed by Kodak, but it was advertised as the first focal plane shutter camera, and it had speeds up to a 500th of a second, which made this very popular for shooting sports or any kind of action. And it had a little viewfinder up here that you could turn either way so that you could shoot this way or this way. Very compact. In about 1925, Kodak came out with this little gem. It was an autographic camera that has a little window here that you could do the autographic. The stylus was actually right in here. As I said, most of the cameras that you'll find that were autographics are missing the stylus. But they made this camera in many different models and many different colors. And what they did was they would make I think a brown one for the Boy Scouts. They made a red one for the Girl Scouts. And it was a pretty nice little feature, taking 127 film, as I said. One of the things that Kodak did when they were making their folding cameras, other people, as I said, started making folding cameras too, a whole bunch of different companies. So they had to have a gimmick. So they developed the ball-bearing shutter. And I'm not sure what difference that makes, except it sounded good, and everybody said, "Oh, they have a ball-bearing shutter." So that was a very popular thing. Some of the cameras you could buy it in several different ways. Some of them had f-stops. Some of them had the European system, just the 1, 2, 3, 4 that would adjust the aperture. And some of them had just an indication of cloudy weather, bright weather, that kind of thing. Also, the shutter speeds, some of them had slow, fast, or time bulb. Some of them had a 50th or 100th. But they wanted to make sure that when somebody bought a camera, they bought one they were comfortable with. Didn't have to learn a lot, because the more they had to learn, probably the less likely they would use it. So they wanted to make it as simple as possible, and they wanted to make sure that people did a lot of film, and they did. As the folding camera led on to a lot of other things in design. One of the problems, if you look at this little Zeiss camera here, one of the problems was the fabric that were made out of the bellows. Sometimes they would develop holes. Moths liked them. They'd eat holes in there, and you'd get a light leak. So in the 40s and on up through the 40s, companies would come up with different ways to solve that problem. This is a little Ansco camera. It's a folding camera typically, but it doesn't have bellows. It's engineered with a box. That was one of the first ones that they said, oh, and they advertised it as, you will never have light leaks in your bellows. Of course, you had light leaks in the other things because there's a little rubber felt thing around there, and they sometimes leak light also. As it went on further, this is a European camera. This is called a Balda. And this was a particularly nice camera because it would take a 35 millimeter, and it had a push button, easy to use, and this was supposed to eliminate light leaks. One of the problems with it is, as I said, the little felt in there, and after you operate it several times, it would leak light also. When I bought this at in Phoenix in a camera store a long time ago, and I used to carry it in my car when I was in college. And after a while, it got to where I had to have the felt replaced inside because it started to leak light. This is another camera that was made in Europe. This is a Balda, or pardon me, that was the Balda. This is the Certo 6. This has all the functions of the regular large view cameras and everything else, and it took 120 film. So this takes a 2 1/4, 2 1/4, 120 film, 2 1/4, 2 1/4 image. It takes 12 exposures on a roll. One of the nice things about it is it's very, very small, and it folds up very nicely. And it had a Zeiss-made lens. This is Carl Zeiss Jenna lens, very, very sharp. And I used to shoot a lot of 2 1/4 slides with this because it had such a sharp lens, and it was all color corrected, and so it made beautiful, beautiful images. During the 40s, more and more people became more proficient with photography. It became a bigger hobby. There became camera shops that had processing labs in them. Some of the drugstores even had little processing labs. One of the things that they would do is they'd go to the drugstore, and the pharmacist would send it into Kodak. After a while, they decided, hey, we can go and we can develop and make contact prints and save the money and make a little profit on it. So that's what they did, and it became much more of a semi-professional hobby. And even this is a little roamer. A lot of companies sprung up, And this is a this is a camera that probably very few people know about, and it was developed in the 40s, and you could buy this thing for almost nothing. It was like, I think $30 for this, but it still had a pretty good shutter, and you could focus the lens, and it was a pretty good camera. Well, next time we're going to explore a picture in a minute, and how important that was to the film industry, and a guy that was very interesting to meet and to talk with. He was a really a great professor, and we'll talk about the professor next time. And we're going to do this through Larry's lens. Thanks, everybody. See you later. Because I have some pictures we can go along with this camera that were taken by her dad. Next time we do this, if you could stay awake instead of snoring, that would be great. And you want to see through Larry's lens? Whoa. Dude, Oscar's shout.